Emily, and welcome to my podcast, Off the Rails. And this is episode 16. So welcome to episode 16. I am delighted to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
More than welcome. So we have two very interesting topics, two that you can not only advise on, but give your own personal experiences. So those two topics that we're going to go into are autism and also ME. Two very different topics that you would never kind of think are related, but in your case, you have first-hand information on both because you are somebody that deals with both on a day-to-day basis. So delighted to have you. And I guess without further ado, let's get stuck in.
Yes.
I think the first topic, let's go with autism. And the reason I think would be good to start there is both of these topics are something that I know kind of surface level, but I would say autism is one that is more widely spoken about. It seems to be something that is kind of more brought into the forefront now. We're talking about it more. We are understanding it somewhat a little bit better, but I think there's a hell of a lot more than what we can know. So yeah, tell me a little bit about autism, what it is in general, like what are the signs that, you know, if anybody listens to this podcast, whether it's themselves or a child, because we do talk about children and autism a lot, what are the signs that we could be looking out for to understand, you know, this could be a trait?
Yes, so autism is a lifelong neurodevelopmental disability, and it affects how people communicate and interact with the world around them. So it can be technically diagnosed from the age of 2 years old. However, in girls especially, it's often diagnosed in adolescence and adulthood, and that's because we're more likely to mask our behaviours.
Interesting. Okay.
So they can go undetected and we kind of fall under the radar a little bit. And that gap is closing with more understanding and more knowledge of what autism is, both in males and females. However, a lot of people like myself are being missed. I was diagnosed when I was 18, and the telling signs for me, it was an accumulation of kind of mental illness, I suppose. So anxiety, depression, OCD. No one could kind of understand the interlink between them all. Why are they co-occurring? And then, you know, a kind of primary school teacher of mine said, how about autism? Does autism explain this? And that's very common for autistic girls, is in adolescence, they begin to struggle with their mental health. And that can be a bit of a telltale sign.
That's really interesting because there's so many things, like you've just said, like it can go undetected.
Yes.
It can be kind of, let me put it this way, it can be put in another box, like, oh, it could be depression, it may not be linked to this, and you don't know. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies nowadays, and I do it. I'll Google something. I won't believe it verbatim, but there'll be part of me that's like, oh, what does that mean? You know, and we all do it because we've got so much at our hands that we become our own like little private detectives. We could become our own doctors, and we want to know everything yesterday. You know, we're not willing to wait to go and see a doctor and get diagnosed. So interesting that one is I wasn't aware of the fact that it's different for females and males. That's really interesting. And you know, like you say, anxiety, depression, I think those are traits that throughout you, especially your early teens, you're going through so much change anyway. Yes. You don't know what the hell is happening with your body as a female. Like,
exactly.
There's so much going on, and not to recognize, is it this, is it that? And also we're very good at pushing things down, suppressing things. I think women are quite good at that. We're less open to maybe, you know, finding things out about ourselves. So you were 18 when you got diagnosed, but was it before that your teacher had said to you, you know, maybe you should look at this route? How did that happen?
So I had been in therapy for quite a long time. Probably when I was 15, I entered therapy up until I was about 20, I believe. So quite a long period of time. And the thing is, I never related to people who had anxiety, who had OCD. Mine felt on this like extreme level, and it wasn't getting better. There was an answer that was just missing. You know, I was watching other people my age who had anxiety, and they would have maybe panic attacks every now and then, but they'd go to parties on the weekend. And my life had become nothing. I didn't do anything. I didn't leave the house, and I just had nothing left, and it just felt so severe. And unfortunately, like you said, we have to become our own detectives, because when I went to the doctors, I was told it's probably exam stress and that I'm a perfectionist. And, you know, they try and fit you in a box because they don't want to label you. But actually, those labels can be really helpful. So yes, when that teacher, my mum works at my old primary school, and was discussing it with someone, and they brought it up, and you know, they taught me, so they know me quite well. And yeah, they were like, you know, this could be something to explore a little bit further. And we did. I actually felt really embarrassed to go for a diagnosis because I thought I was wasting their time. Because I didn't know what autism was either. And I had that stereotype in my head of a young boy who really obsesses over trains, for example. That is the stereotype that unfortunately we all have. And we only come to learn about it when it begins to impact our own lives or somebody else's lives, a loved one's lives. So I was very fortunate because I was in CAMS at the time. CAMS, you know, there's good things I can say about it. There's more negative things I could say about it. They weren't particularly helpful in providing support for me, but they pushed my diagnosis through really quick. So most people in the UK, the average waiting list is 5 years. 2 years, and then in Leeds it's 10 years.
Oh wow.
And yes, so mine was pushed through very fast. I'm very grateful for that. So I was waiting a couple of months, which is very good.
Okay, so you had severe anxiety, so much so that you know you became quite internal. You didn't want to go outside, these things, and which magnifies all of that again, doesn't it? You know, because you're stuck with your own thoughts and all of those things. So luckily somebody close to you and could kind of recognize certain traits pushed on your behalf, and also then you pushed because, you know, as you say, it was embarrassing. It was something that didn't feel comfortable, or like you may have been wasting professionals' time. But however, you did push for your own purpose, which has paid off to be a positive. So when you do get diagnosed, what is the help that's out there? How does that look? Is it medication? Is it a mix of being able to manage certain behavioral like what does it look like once you get a diagnosis?
Do you know what? It's so differing. So if you were to have medication, it would be for a co-occurring condition like anxiety and depression. So there's no medication to treat autism. Autism is largely thought to be genetic, although there's lots of different debates. Some of them less valid than others. And it's ongoing research, so we'll find out more. But I'm personally on medication, but that is to treat co-occurring depression mostly, and anxiety. I didn't receive any support after my diagnosis. And this is the problem, because there's very limited adult services for autistic people. A lot of people aren't specialised in autism and don't know what to do. So that's what's really particularly beneficial about getting a diagnosis in childhood. There's a lot more understanding, and there are support services for children, but I've spoken to many adults and they seem to just be dropped.
Yeah, because it's become something that is being talked about more, and it feels like almost like, oh, it's a new thing, but obviously it's not. It's something that has been around for generations. However, we're learning more about it, but as I said, it's something we still need to learn so much more about. So it feels like, yeah, like you've just captured, if you're very young, there seems to be more awareness and more support to know what to do.
Absolutely.
Whereas in adulthood, you kind of left. Okay, so now I've got an understanding, I've got a label, I've got a word that is put against these things that I was feeling, this way I was feeling. However, what do I do?
What do I do?
So almost it can leave certain people, I would imagine, especially if it's linked to anxiety, maybe even more anxious, because, okay, well, now I know what it is, but I have no idea what to do with it. So, that can open a big can of worms, even more than what you had before, possibly. Is the thought process,
And that's right. I remember when I'd received my diagnosis, it was in lockdown. So I got a phone call saying that I'd been diagnosed. And that was a huge shock for me. It came out of the blue. I don't think my family were as surprised, but for me, I just thought, it's anxiety, it's depression. I've been told that my whole life. I've been told that I'm going to come out of my shell one day and grow out of it. And I was waiting for that moment, and it just never happened. But I remember I received a booklet through the door, and it was very much aimed at parents, because they're assuming your child's been diagnosed with autism, not your teenager or your adult child. So it was very much like children's books to read and support services for parents. So there was nothing. There was just nothing out there. And I had a therapist at the time who was incredible, but she wasn't specialised in autism. So that's basically when I decided to set up my Instagram account called Life Behind a Mask, because that is probably the best thing that's happened, is I've found a community, and it's that relatability that's been really helpful, because you feel less alone. So yes, I might not be supported. Don't get me wrong, there are support services out there, and I'm sure some people do get support. I'm talking on my behalf here, and the fact that I didn't. But I think I didn't need that. I needed time to come to terms with it. And I needed time to respect my strengths and my limitations, and to adapt my life accordingly. And that's what I did. And I was empowered to do that because I met other people who were also going through the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's actually a lovely way to look at it. That one, again, you went ahead and did something for you, but not only for you in silo, you've done it for other people. So you've created this community where people can support each other, share experiences, understand. So I think that's amazing. But talk me through, so for you, like you say, it's this anxious, it's around depression. How do you, on a day-to-day basis, listen to your own body and your own mind of, okay, maybe I'm feeling more anxious than normal. There's something that's kind of, pushing me a little bit more in this direction. So I'm going to kind of navigate myself away. Or what does that look like? How do you control, for anybody listening again, that's, maybe newly diagnosed, or maybe thinks they could be autistic, or just, but they have anxiety or depression, and they want to know kind of, okay, this is somebody that firsthand has these things and understands exactly what I, have been going through. How do you control, to the best of your ability, how can you control those things, or make it a better situation to kind of be in?
Yeah, I mean, I could say to do mindfulness and breathing techniques, but that's a very simple thing to say for such a big difficulty. And personally, it's always so hard when someone says, "Oh, breathe," or set aside 10 minutes a day for some meditation. That's really difficult, and people don't want to hear it. So I'm going to stay away from saying that, because I know not what people will be saying. For me, it's mindset. For me, you have to respect your own boundaries. And I've pushed myself so far, and I can sit here today and say that things can get better. I think when you're given that label of autism, that diagnosis, it's reassuring because you know that you know how to explain your difficulties to other people. But also, I went from having anxiety and depression that, you know, can kind of come and go throughout your life, to autism, which is a lifelong disability.
Yeah.
It felt really daunting to me. And it meant that I had to change things. I couldn't keep pushing myself to do things that I didn't want to do, such as going to university. And I pulled out of that before I even went. And I decided to do an online business. And even though an online business was terrifying at first, it's still within my comfort zone to some extent, because I'm sat here at my desk in my own home, in my bedroom, in an environment that feels really safe for me. So I think on the days where you're feeling anxious, just respect yourself. It's okay to have difficulties that other people might not have. It doesn't make you less than or other. It just means that you have to take care of yourself in a different way. Autistic or not, we all have differences. We all have struggles. It's a part of life that's inevitable, unfortunately. So you just have to actually acknowledge that, okay, today I'm struggling. Let's have a day off where I just do something for me. And that might sound really simple, but there's no real technique that I can say that's going to be universally helpful to everybody, other than respect yourself and appreciate that you might have some unique difficulties, and that's okay.
I think that's really sound advice, though, because it sounds so doable. However, actually taking time for yourself is something that I would say anybody has had some experience where I haven't taken even 10 minutes of today for me. And it can be anything from just sitting in a quiet room, reading a book, having a cup of coffee alone, or whatever it may be. And it's just kind of resetting yourself and, you know, allowing yourself to feel your own feelings. Because, like I think we mentioned, you know, at the top, this kind of feeling, and I know I've done it so many times, and I still continue to do it. It's habitual. Like, you push down your own feelings. It's like, I just need to get this done. I'll just get through this. And you like become more and more and more and more tired. And then you're like, why am I doing this? Why am I ignoring how I really feel? And if I just listen to myself, take that afternoon, that day, I will feel better. And ultimately, if you don't look after yourself, you cannot look after anybody else. And if you know, if that's what you want to do, and it's something that I advocate for, it's something obviously you advocate for. And if you don't look after yourself, then you definitely can't spread that positivity and spread that help without doing it yourself. And you hear and see so many kind of amazing quotes around that, you know, fill up your own cup before you fill up somebody else's. But it's so true. It's so true.
Absolutely. And, you know, quality rest as well. I see so many people, my friends, people online, becoming so frustrated with themselves because they do an hour of work and then they need to lie in a dark room with headphones on to just drown out any noise and any sensory kind of overload. It's frustrating for us because we can't live that kind of normal life of working a 9 to 5 all the time. It's difficult. It's only 21% of autistic people are in full-time employment, and that's partly because of it. You know, autistic burnout is a real thing and it can be severe. So if you need to take that time and don't beat yourself up for needing that time every day, perhaps. I know it makes your life difficult. Trust me, I get it because I'm there too. But it shouldn't be something that you're ashamed of.
No, I think it's amazing, and the statistics that you're bringing, I'm shocked by. And I think what is nice is this, the reason why you and I have met today is to create more awareness around this topic. I've worked with many people where I have to be honest, I've gotten frustrated because I didn't know. And this is why awareness is so important. You'll get people that are like, I haven't got the energy to do that today. And you kind of think, Are they playing on that? Are they a bit lazy? Did they not want to do it? Like, because you're understanding, and I had a level of ignorance and I didn't appreciate, and I want to change that. I've already come so far with wanting to change it, but there's still so much I need to learn and approach in a different way to understand when people are feeling a certain way, there could be a reason behind it, and appreciating that and playing to somebody's strengths and knowing when to back off and when to be like, okay, I understand. Let's work around that, because we'll all meet people that, may have autism or whatever it may be. But most definitely, especially in a working environment, to be able to have a certain amount of awareness and appreciation and give people space.
Exactly.
Is very important.
And, you're not the only one. I'm sure all of us, everybody listening today, has at some point been ignorant towards this topic, or maybe still feels as though they are.
Yeah.
And that's normal, because we can't know everything about every disability. I am the first one to say I'm ignorant to lots of other disabilities, because unfortunately I don't have the time in the day to study them. I wish I did, but I don't. And, I think it's that willingness to learn, that willingness to show up and ask questions. And, I said on a live video the other day when I was talking about kind of accessibility within the workplace, ask those questions. It's okay to ask. I think people feel quite insecure, or maybe, I don't know, nervous to show that they are ignorant to the topic. We're never going to judge that, because I think that willingness to learn just shows how dedicated you are to supporting us. And that's something I will always appreciate personally.
Yeah, no, I think it's super important, because I think if we're societal wise, if we're going to live, side by side, which we should, like shoulder to shoulder, each person is just as important as the other, whether we have autism or not. It doesn't make you any less of a person. It's the understanding and adapting. And I think it's the key takeaway for me is, okay, yeah. And one thing that I want to bring up is I have some relatives, a younger generation, that, maybe again, because they are younger, it's kind of easier to identify, maybe. I don't know. Or maybe it's because it's fresher in my head of, these are the things that you should be looking out for. So, I have two younger relatives, both male. One is more, it seems to be his autism is more relative towards touch. So his body will seize up and he doesn't want touch or eye contact. It just will not make eye contact. And when I relate his traits to maybe, again, a working environment, I've worked with people that, their eye contact hasn't been there, or their body language will seize up. And I, again, have been like, well, why are they acting like that? But then I'm like, well, why, just because this person's a grown man and this person is a child, I need to have the same respect and the same kind of attitude towards both. Do you know what I mean? And I haven't at some point, I've been kind of like, why is this person acting like that? And I'm like, actually, they're the same traits. And
I think it's interesting you say that, because I think as a society, we judge grown men and women for acting in that way, for unmasking. And this is why people mask, because of society's judgment towards them. Some people will find it really helpful to carry a toy with them, or fidget toys, to not make eye contact when having conversation, because that can actually be physically painful for some people. So can touch. And we're taught that that's rude as an adult. You've got to snap out of it and you've got to grow up.
Yeah, exactly.
When I'm now, you can cope. Well, actually, we can't sometimes, and it's okay to unmask and to show our authentic selves. So there is, that is the same behavior. We just judge it in adulthood.
Yeah, and that's because that's been my first-hand experience, where I've felt empathetic here with the child. However, here I'm like, oh, come on. And that's my own, upon reflection, I'm like, why did you do that? Why were you so quick to judge and so quick to be like, oh, come on, you're a grown adult, you shouldn't be that way. But thank God I want to learn more, so I know how to not be that person, because I don't want to be that person to judge quickly. I want to be able to, you know, recognize and ask the questions, like you say, and support, because, you know, that's what I want to learn. So I find that interesting. The other example I have is I have another young relative that is, again, male, and is very much along the lines of everything has to be, I guess the best way of describing it is like a copy paste. Every day has to be exactly the same. So if there's anything routine that looks slightly different, he can get incredibly anxious, so much so that it's like almost hysteria. So yeah, that's, and often people looking from the outside in can be like, badly behaved child, spoiled, you know, all these things that people again are very quick to judge. But you know, that is, I would guess for me, I deem that as slightly more a more extreme kind of case, where unless everything is the same, there is this kind of backlash of, yeah, hysteria is the best way I can think of it.
Yeah, you know, I work with an autistic adult male as well, and he really struggles when there's any changes in routine. And his loved ones struggle to appreciate that and respect that, because to them it's just like, well, let's just go with the flow. But it's so distressing when things are out of place. And you know, that's a really common one for autistic people, to struggle with that change in routine. And with children, because they don't quite have that emotional regulation, we can see those breakdowns and those meltdowns quite severely, I suppose, because they don't have the vocabulary to express themselves. So, you know, I've worked with schools before to help their children with routine, and also a friend who has a little girl, and you know, picture communication cards can be really helpful. So at the start of the day, what does your day look like? You're going to get out of bed, you're going to eat breakfast, you're going to brush your teeth, and then we're going to go here. And actually, there's been a change in routine here. This is what we're now doing. And those picture communication cards can really help children to just visualize what's ahead of them, to lower that anxiety, and just be told of any changes in advance.
I think, yeah, that's really, yeah. You know, again, that's for anybody listening. It's like, okay, maybe these are things you can introduce or try, because yeah, you don't often know. It's how to educate yourself, you know, to be able to support. And I think that's, if anybody, you know, me included, if I'm around anybody that I feel, okay, I'm kind of tuning into something that I feel is a trait of autism, how can I best deal with this? How can I, you know, try and support the situation, not control it, but support the situation, because it's an unknown area for me. So that's all I can do within my kind of remit. So, you know, it's about building a support, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. You know, I'd look back at when I was in school, and in secondary school, there'd be room changes. So it would have a sign on the door and it would say, go to F21 and instead. And that would, my heart would race. I'd be shaking, because I didn't know that was going to be happening. Now I've got to find the room, and it's not that big of a deal for anybody else. But for me, that was so anxiety provoking. If I could have just had an email at the start of the day, just a heads up, you're going to be in this room instead. But we don't think about it, because we're not autistic. Some of us aren't autistic, and a lot of us aren't autistic, and we struggle to see it from an autistic person's perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's that appreciation for everybody being an individual, and with life the way it is, we're always, you know, so focused, so tunnel visioned. The majority of us are that, oh, well, you know, well, it's okay for me, so it should be okay for everybody else. And that kind of attitude plays out so often. And I think it is just those things that, you know, if you're in a certain role or you're around certain people and you can do something that's a little bit more preventative or kind of like a warning, like you've said, like some sort of like you can organize in a different way, you know about it, so let everybody know about it. It might just it might support or reduce anxiety in some way.
Absolutely. It's all thinking outside the box, thinking creatively. The National Autistic Society always has great advice on how to accommodate autistic people. So if anybody here is like stuck for how to do that, then check out that website and contact people like myself and people on social media and just ask, because we'll be there to support.
Yeah, no, I think that's super important, because there is so many people that, yeah, like we've covered, either you feel like, yes, I have some of these traits, but
Yeah.
I am not brave enough to maybe explore and want to hear that I have autism,
Yeah.
or people that have been diagnosed and the help is limited, so they feel frustrated, or a parent that, or a carer that doesn't quite know where to turn. You know, there is lots of people in that situation, whether it's firsthand or secondary.
Yes.
You know, I think this I hope this conversation will definitely support, and I link all of your socials as well, and anybody that, you know, wants to get in touch with you firsthand, I think that'd be brilliant. So is there anything within the world of autism that we haven't maybe covered? And of course we can't cover everything because we're only here for a short time today, but anything that you think is kind of, you know, really kind of pivotal that we should end this particular part of our conversation with, because we're going to move on now to the next topic. But is there anything you kind of think, okay, we should definitely kind of just hook on that?
I think, I suppose, to round up this conversation, the key takeaway is that autism is a spectrum. There's a saying, if you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. You know, I'm still learning about autism because I'm going to meet new autistic people all the time who come to my practice for support, and I'm learning about their unique presentation. And that's something I won't have seen before because they're individual and they're completely different. So it's an ongoing learning curve for us all, whether we're autistic or not. But when we say that autism is a spectrum, that's not going from least severe to most severe. It's simply representing the kind of array of traits that people display. So it's simply showing, it's not a straight line, it's more of a circle, saying that this encapsulates lots of unique traits.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely, I think remain open-minded is something that I'm kind of taking away from it, is we learn so much from each other. And I think not being afraid of asking, like I approached you because I find who you are and what you do fascinating, and the fact that you are so open to help anybody that has that mindset, I think is worth their weight in gold. And we had a brief conversation before today, and I just, I found you fascinating. I find you fascinating. So I think spreading as much awareness and remaining open and remaining kind of willing to learn and continue to educate yourself. All of us, it goes without saying, life is an education. It never stops moving on, full stop. But if you can take the time, a little bit of time, to understand and have that empathy for other people, you know, we all come from different walks of life. I think it will take us much further to just stop and kind of understand and just think about something, digest it, and try and understand. And like you say, if you, or like I say, if you don't understand it, ask the questions. I think you're very open. I think the majority of people will be open to, you know, by asking the questions, you're helping, and you know that kind of ripple effect of helping each other.
Absolutely. Always ask questions.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, moving on from that, not kind of a seamless link, but
well, maybe
for you, it could be. Yeah, it could be. I think I've really enjoyed that topic. I think it's yeah, it's a minefield. It's a topic that I want to learn more of. However, for today, we're going to move on to something that's very personal to you. You're going to talk me through your personal experience of ME.
Yeah.
I think I was, when I first spoke to you, quite surprised, because it's something my knowledge of ME is very, very limited. So
Yeah.
I'm going to learn a lot, I'm sure, in the next kind of 30 minutes speaking to you. And also, my knowledge of ME is that I always associated it with older people.
Yes.
So before we dive into this topic, what does ME actually stand for?
ME stands for Myalgic Encephalomyelitis, and it's also called chronic fatigue syndrome. So it's a long-term condition that affects different parts of the body. The most kind of common symptom, I suppose, is that extreme tiredness. Right now, the cause is unknown, so you can't be tested for it. It's kind of a game of ruling everything out. So the diagnostic process is a difficult one.
Oh, so it's like a process of elimination then. There isn't like a blood test or anything that can be found. Right, okay.
The thing is, for me, it is linked and to autism. And for a lot of people, it is linked to autism. We're seeing it more and more. And this is where we go to kind of masking.
So I was wrong to say not a seamless link. You were right to fool me on that.
Well, for a lot of people, it might, it depends. But what we're seeing more of is that, especially autistic women, we mask. And like you said earlier, we suppress. And when we suppress our emotion, we get somatization. So we kind of get this kind of physical representation of this mental illness within the body. And as a coping mechanism, as a masking mechanism for autism, I revised a lot, because I thought, if I revise all the time, I'm going to look really unapproachable. And people won't come up to me. People won't talk to me. But it also gives me an identity, because I kind of lost my friends. Didn't really have any friends around me, didn't do anything outside of school. And I just felt like that was my identity. So I revised to an extreme extent of getting up at 4 a.m. every morning, revising all day. I'd sit in the same chair at school. And that was for years, until my body couldn't take it anymore and I had to leave school early. So for me, it is linked. And even just the link with mental illness as well. The effect that anxiety has on your body, on your immune system. It's thought to be kind of an immune disorder, although, again, that's kind of a hypothesis. It's difficult when getting diagnosed when you have mental illness, because it's blamed on mental illness. So it's like, oh, you have depression. Depressed people get tired. Or you have anxiety, that must be really have an effect on your body. It's just because you're anxious. Rest up,
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is actually more severe. And all you can have is really blood tests to rule out other things, deficiencies. I was tested for other things as well, but it's a process of an elimination. And also you need to get a doctor who trusts you. And that is so challenging in today's society.
Yeah, completely. That's very interesting. I can see now you've explained the links, because they are so closely connected. When I'm in an anxious state, I can't sleep. When I'm in bed at night, the thoughts, and I cannot stop the thoughts, and it's so irritating. I'm like, basically my head won't be quiet.
I know, we were both up at 3 a.m.
Exactly. and there's nothing more frustrating. And I'm my own worst enemy. I'll reach my phone and I'm like, okay, well, I could be doing this. And I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, Claire, please stop. Please stop. And I can't. And then it's like this ripple effect of I'm mentally exhausted, and then I'm physically exhausted because I haven't slept. So I can relate somewhat to some things you've said, to the fact that, it's a process of elimination, because we all feel certain things at certain times. Like sometimes my anxiety is heightened for certain things that are going on. But so you Tell me about your experience. So you went to a doctor. How did that trust kind of be built to really understand exactly, this is what it is. This is the reason.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. So when I left school, it became apparent that something was pretty wrong. I'm a determined person. I go into school every day, even if it's like killing me almost. But yeah, I think we went to the doctors again, mental illness, blood tests, they all came back clear. So no deficiencies, nothing to explain this kind of extreme tiredness. I believe you need to have the symptoms for 6 months for them to consider a diagnosis of ME. So they need to be quite persistent over that time. And it's not just tiredness, it's swollen lymph nodes, it's headaches, it's joint pain. There's so many things, loss of oxygen, blood pooling, so many different things, post-exertional malaise. So when you do an activity, it gets worse, and that energy can't be replenished through sleep, essentially. So they're like a lot of the key things that they're looking for. And then I was referred to the Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic, and that's where I got my diagnosis. So they're specialised in helping people with ME and providing support for people with ME or symptoms of ME. And it's interesting because they were getting training for autism at that time, because they'd seen such a huge increase in the link between autism and ME that they wanted to understand it better. So I was diagnosed officially when I was 20 years old, and I'd started with the symptoms probably when I was 16, 17.
Wow. So I'm just kind of relating both things. So correct me if I was wrong. You were 18 when you got diagnosed with autism,
Yes.
and 20 when you got diagnosed with ME.
Yeah.
How did that affect you personally, having these diagnoses? Did it help? Did it give you answers? What was your reaction? Because it's a lot to take. Yes, you've had the build-up of all these years of certain feelings and certain your way of being, and you were coping with it in the best way you knew possible, or you were just getting on with it because that's how you did it.
Yes.
To fight fire, that was just like keep going, and then you all of a sudden get a lot of answers almost.
Yeah.
How did it make you feel? Was it positive? Was it overwhelming? A mix of both?
It was positive, but it was also a huge period of grief. And I think there's a loss there. There's a loss of what could have been.
Right.
And it's emotional. It's emotional to talk about, because I think even with every flare up, that grief hits again. Because I'm 21 and I shouldn't have to be in bed for most of the day. I shouldn't have to only leave the house a couple of times a year, or not be able to socialize with friends outside of the home. It's not really the life I thought I'd have, not the life anybody thinks they have, I suppose. But so it did come with a big period of grief, because suddenly it wasn't just kind of mental illness that might be helped with therapy. It was a lifelong developmental disability that I've always had. So you kind of grieve what could have been as well. If only I'd have had that support, would I have been okay now? If only I'd have had that diagnosis of autism, would I have ME now? Because I wouldn't have needed to mask or suppress things. So that's huge to think about. And, it's not even worth thinking about, because it's happened now, and I do have ME and I'm living with it. It's hard. It's emotional, but I'm doing the best I can with it. And I think that's all anybody can do. And it's empowered me to have a voice. So in a way, I'd never take away the lessons I've learned. I might have chosen to learn them a different way than having ME, but I've learned them, and I'm actually really grateful for that, because I don't take anything for granted, and I grab every opportunity I can, because I don't know what I'll be like tomorrow. You can't predict it.
Yeah, and I think that is empowering. I think that is the word, because it takes a huge amount of strength I would imagine, even just to get up every day and be like, okay, what is today going to throw at me? How am I going to physically, feel about today, mentally feel about today? So yeah, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because it seemed like there was a coping mechanism of fighting fire for so long, and then diagnosis 1 followed up by diagnosis 2, and both being in a way linked that, okay, there's no tablet that's going to really fix this. There's no timeline to it where it's going to get better. It's the two things that here they are, and it's how you deal with them almost, isn't it? You've been amazing, and I'm sure you have your days where that isn't the case at all.
Some days where I'm crying on the phone to my friend, but and I think that's, you've seen me positive today. I'm a very smiley person. I'm genuinely very positive, and that is who I am. But at the same time, I have bad days, and you don't see me on those bad days, other than the people who are really close to me, and it's unimaginable, I suppose, for a lot of people. And what's interesting is people struggled with the lockdown of COVID, and that's my life.
Wow, yeah.
And it's just interesting to see how people crumbled with that, because they were kind of experiencing what it is like for someone to live with ME and not being able to leave the house. But I'd come from this hard worker, this high achiever, this person who defined themselves as the hardest worker. I wanted to be the hardest worker. I kind of took pride in that. To someone who had to use a wheelchair to leave the house and use a walking stick and was in bed all the time. It's an incredible loss. But I've worked with it, and I think this is kind of message of the entire podcast. Work with what you've got. Like, it doesn't have to mean it's the end. You can still achieve your dreams. You might just have to think outside the box as to how you're going to get there.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely beautiful message, and the power that you have. And I spoke to you the other day prior to this podcast, and I said to you afterwards, I was like, you've given me so much energy. Like, you really did. You gave me like I think I said fire in my belly to be like, God, if you're faced with the challenges you have, and you can do what you do, almost it gives people a bit of, people with relativity, hope and empowerment. But people that don't, it's kind of like, what have you got to complain about? Like, come on, Claire. Like, sometimes it makes you feel like that. You're like, oh, get on with it. And I think your vibrancy for life is it's everything. And that's you can, and we've never met in person, but even through a video call, it's like, wow, you really, you're like a battery that I've plugged into, and I'm like, right, okay, wow, that feels absolutely amazing. Like,
that's like the best compliment.
Honestly, and that's how I felt the other day. And I told you that I recently tested positive for COVID, and I feel like crap. But again, it's like, come on, like it's something. I'm lucky I'll get over this in a few days, and I'll bounce back. It's a virus through my body, and I know that it's just something that I'll bounce back from. And speaking,
we all go through things, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think what's lovely about you is, you speak to some people, and it's like, it's I don't know the best way of kind of putting it. It's I've been dealt such a bad card, and my situation is worse than everybody else's, and I think you're allowed to feel that way. And I sometimes like, God damn my life, sometimes it's so shit, but you seem to just have this vibrancy, and again, like every day, no 2 days are the same, but that energy and the fact that you've put those parts of what you've learned so far and what you continue to want to learn and empower people from a knowledge point of view and a support point of view with what you're doing from a work point, like through your Instagram, through your socials, you're kind of giving that olive branch to anybody that has this relativity of, okay, well, let's talk about it. Let's, support.
Yeah, and thank you for everything you said. It's very, it's lovely to know that despite my lack of energy, I can give energy to other people. Yeah. Ironic. But I will, sometimes I'll phone my friend George and I'll be like, this is a bit unfair, isn't it? Like, what is my life? But at the end of the day, it's led me here, and I genuinely wouldn't change anything. Which it might be a bit crazy to say, but I wouldn't. And everybody has something going on.
Yeah.
And I think my friends always preface like, oh, I'm tired today. Not as tired as you. Like, I'm not trying to... They don't need to say that, because it's okay for other people to have struggles. I don't compare my struggles to anybody else's. When you said you had COVID, I wasn't like, oh, well, she's going to be over it in a couple of days. I have empathy for everybody. And I think my challenge might be different to yours or anybody else is listening to this, but we still all know what adversity feels like to some extent. So yeah, I just hope to lift people up and think, you can make that happen, because I've made it happen and I didn't think I could.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice note to put out there, because I was speaking to a friend a little while ago, and you often get, this is quite maybe going off in a little tangent, but it's when you meet people, and I live in Porto, I am not from here, obviously, and I have to go out of my way to meet people, and I find it exhausting, and I find it repetitive, and it's just like, oh, same crap, like, hi, I'm Claire, and da-da-da-da-da. And when I get asked a question, what is it you do? Yeah. And I feel like that is the worst question that you could ask somebody. And the reason why is because I feel like people want to put you in a box, and they've labeled you. Oh, you're this, you're of this sort of stature, this is your financial state. I feel like once some people, and it's only some people, but they know what your job is, they put you very much in a box. Financial status, education-wise, what they kind of think of you and what they deem you as. And I just think, like today, and I hope this is where I make sense with that, is when you take the time to sit down and talk to somebody, there is so many layers to everybody. And the saying, don't judge a book by its cover, is so true. So true. Like, everybody's got something. And I think everybody's journey is unique, but there is something that's beautiful that everybody, if you take the time, you can relate, and I think that's what's nice.
Definitely, there's relatability in everything, and it's looking for those similarities instead of the differences.
Yes.
There might be people who are listening who don't have ME, don't know anybody with ME, but they can take something away, whether it's grabbing opportunities as they come, or never taking a moment for granted, or maybe just understanding that someone might have something going on that you can't see, because I don't think anyone would assume I have ME, but like after this I'll be going for a nap, and I'll be, that is my life, and you can see it, but that's what it is. So just never make assumptions and always be open to learning.
Yeah, and I think it's that as well, is the visibility.
Yeah.
And it is, again, taking and making time to understand people, because not everything is visible. And there's so many kind of, oh, you'll be all right, you look okay. And yeah, so I think
you look really well today. Oh, I've got makeup on, like loads.
Yeah. So I think that's what's beautiful about taking the time to get to know somebody. So that's, I think, brings us full circle to today's podcast. I have loved speaking with you. I have learned so much about the two topics, but learned so much about you, which is so nice. It's so nice to meet somebody and feel, I don't know, like a really nice feeling towards somebody. Like it's a lovely feeling. And like you say, there's so many things that we can do, and there should be less and less barriers. Like, you can't leave home very often, or as often as you would like to because of your circumstances. However, we've made this happen.
Exactly.
And you know, it's brought me joy. I hope it's brought you a little bit of joy as well. And for anybody listening, I think, you know, that's the purpose, is to spread a good message as much as possible. And that's exactly why I wanted to speak to you today on these topics. So thank you so much. I've really, really enjoyed it. It's definitely a topic, both topics, because we have covered a lot. Both topics are definitely worth, you know, bringing a bigger awareness around them and making sure people, if you are somebody that can relate firsthand, or you know somebody that has either ME or autism, or we've spoken about anxiety, depression, lots of different things, you know, take the time to touch base, you know, listen, understand a little bit more, because I think if we're all honest, we've all had a touch of something that's relative within this conversation today that has affected us all, you know. So definitely, I think it's, you know, it's that don't judge too quick. And sometimes we all need reminding of that, you know, wait, just hold on, just digest, just ask the person.
Yes.
And you'll always be surprised, I think. I think that's the beauty of life. You're always surprised of who you'll meet and what they'll give to your life, whether it's a fleeting moment or it's, you know, the start of something a little bit deeper. So yeah, I have totally enjoyed today, and I'm sure anybody listening has as well. I could talk to you for hours. But like you said, I'll probably me as well as you go for that nap now.
Yeah, having that.
So yeah, thank you so much, Emily. I've
Thank you for
totally enjoyed today.
me.
And yeah, if there's anything anybody wants to ask, I will be linking Emily's socials so you can get in touch directly. And yeah, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.